Hello, my name is Priscilla Jogminus, and I am a certified hypnotherapist, a neurolinguistic practitioner, and a guided imagery master. Today, I would like to talk to you about panic attacks and connections, and also the basics of a panic attack and how it doesn't always start with the apex, which is what we call the event. The panic attacks start actually very on a small scale and build up to a large event. So I'd like to give you maybe an example of what I'm talking about. So let's say, for example, that you're driving on the freeway and you feel your body shift a little bit. Now, the majority of the people who don't have anxiety or stress or aren't really aware of panic attacks and how they work would probably not feel the shift. It would be very, very minute. But this particular shift is extremely important because this is the actual beginning of a panic attack. How a panic attack works, the way to break it down is basically in about 3 or 4 stages. The first stage is very, very small. The mind and the body are very connected. And a panic attack starts out with a simple shift, not only biologically with increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, maybe the blood flowing to the limbs instead of the brain, flowing away from the brain and into the limbs and into the arms and legs and, the lower part of the body, but also a biological shift on an emotional, mental, and physical level. These shifts are very small and minute. If you're driving on the freeway and you're having the normal thoughts that you have every single day, and introduced is an outside stimulus, thought, or feeling. Usually, thoughts will be something totally different than what you're thinking before the shift happens. On a biological level, once the outside stimulus comes in and shifts your thought process, your brain goes from the logical thinking brain and shifts into the animal brain. This is where fight, flight, or freeze lives. You experience all 3 of these during a panic attack, all leading up to the apex of the attack, which is what I call the event. During the time of this, it could be days, it could be hours, or it could be just buildup of stress. Everyone is different, and as you study your own reactions, and once you have knowledge and information about what your triggers are, you'll be able to prevent the apex. My goal today is helping you understand how the panic attacks start so that you're able to stop from getting to the apex. So once this biological shift happens, this outside stimulus comes into your brain. It connects to you biologically. Your body starts to shift and change. Your heart rate may raise, your sight may sharpen, and you may feel a sense of shift in your thinking from logical to animal brain, which is basically survival mode. So the first experience that you're going to have, the first shift biologically that most people have, not everyone, is you're going to have the outside stimulus affect your biological changes in your body. And the first thing that will happen is the feeling of fight. Your body is ramping up for a situation that is beyond its control. So these thoughts will turn to very negative and even possibly thoughts of feeling that you're going to die or thoughts that something's wrong or incorrect. These are the thoughts that are basically the fighting thoughts of the brain. The brain is fighting for its existence, for its survival, and the only thing it knows at this point is how it's going to get out of the situation alive. Now, with someone with anxiety or stress, again, in this situation, we're driving on the freeway. So there is nothing at this point. I mean, things do happen on the freeway, but in this particular scenario, this person is driving on a normal day, doing the normal things that they do every single day. But their alarm system is kind of going a little haywire. We're experiencing something that doesn't logically make sense, but in that moment, to our animal mind, it makes sense because it's all about survival in that moment. So when a stimulus comes in, we automatically shift biologically. And things change, like our heart rate, our sight, everything that you would think of that would get you ready to fight off a big tiger or maybe a really big giant animal that, when our brain was first forming would be a threat, and we would immediately have to shift from a state of, purity and feeling great and no worries into an aware and reactive state. Now, the key word here is reaction. So your mind and your body cannot coexist, reaction and logical thought. The majority of the time, if you're thinking in your logical brain, you are not going to be thinking reactively. You're going to be thinking logically. But if you are faced with a threat, and if your fight, flight, or freeze feels as if you're going to need to amp up for a fight, flight, or to freeze, which is to hide from the, opponent, your mind is not going to be, and your body is not going to be, in a state of logical thought. You can only shift in between the two depending on the situation. Now, in every other situation where you would need to fight off this animal, run into a burning building to rescue your baby, or a situation like that, these are great tools. But when it's not functioning correctly, this can actually be caused on a normal, everyday situation. So when you're in a panic attack mode, you are not logically thinking. So the first thing you need to do when you feel this shift happen is be aware of it. The first time a thought comes in that is foreign or something that is reactionary and is not your normal way of thinking, you need to ask yourself, you need to challenge this thought. So let's say a very common one is, I feel like I'm going to die, or I feel like I'm in danger. Now again, if we're looking at the situation clearly, this person's driving on the freeway, and they're not in a deathly situation. I mean, obviously we could go into other scenarios where they would be, but in this particular scenario, this person is safely driving to work, doing the same thing they do every single day. There is no threat, there's nothing going wrong. This person is just simply doing what they do all the time. So they need to ask themselves, does that sound logical? And you want to really pick apart that thought. Once you are able to shift from the reactionary thinking into the logical thinking, your body and your mind will not be able to coexist in the same state. Therefore, you will diffuse the feelings of fight, flight, or freeze. If you are not able to disarm this stimulus and you entertain it, then you will enter into the second stage of the panic attack, which is obsessive thinking and a shift in your biological makeup and the way that it's responding. So once your body shifts into the second stage of a panic attack, you're going to be experiencing thoughts becoming a flight feeling. So the first stage of a panic attack is fight. Our body is ramping up for a fight. Our thoughts are shifting from logical thinking to animalistic thinking, which is straight survival. So our pulse is raising, our heart rate is raising, our breathing is getting deeper and wider. Our blood is going from our brain into our arms and legs, and getting ready for step 2, which is basically flight. At this moment, most people in this process of a panic attack will feel like they need to get out or away of the situation. Now, they may do this in many ways. They may, leave their car there in traffic and run out. But at stage 2, this is really not likely to happen. But stage 2 of the process is usually when those people start to think to themselves, I don't really feel very good. I'm feeling a bad feeling about where I'm going. Maybe I shouldn't go to work today. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe something bad is going to happen. So we start with our predictive thinking. We become psychics all of a sudden, and we start predicting into the future that maybe something really bad is going to happen, and maybe we need to somehow get away from the situation. If we're not able to logically challenge these thoughts by stage 2, which would be to ask ourselves again at this point, trying to get ourselves out of animal brain and into logical brain, maybe I'm just feeling a little stressed and I'm going to be okay. There is still a chance at stage 2 where we can challenge this thinking. So we've gone into fight, now we've gone into flight, and we can still challenge this thinking in stage 2. But let's say that we fail at stage 2 to challenge our logical thoughts, and we continue in our animalistic brain. Stage 3 is going to be freeze. We become frozen in the panic attack. This is when the apex happens. The apex of a panic attack is when we are frozen not only in our obsessive thinking, in our biological state, in our neurological change of state, but now we are frozen in the panic attack. At this point, all we can do is write it out and then allow ourselves to calm down and get back into natural and normal thinking, logical thinking. At this state, you can still override, but it is very difficult because the body and mind have become locked and frozen in this panic attack. Most people at this point are not able to shift their processes. So if you start from the beginning, if you're able to catch the attack when it starts to shift and change at the very, very beginning, you can avoid this apex. So if we go back to step 1 and step 2, we are still able at this point to change our biological responses. So the first thing we need to do is shift into logical thinking. This will shift our brain from these automatic thoughts into logical thoughts. The second step that we need to take is to shift our breathing. We need to slow our breathing down. So we need to start taking deep breaths, and we need to concentrate and focus on something besides these impeding thoughts. We need to challenge them and ask ourselves, does that really make sense at this moment? We're not denying the thoughts and saying they're incorrect. We are saying that maybe there's a chance that it's not that extreme. And maybe what we're feeling is stress. Because we have talked ourselves into this panic attack at this point, especially if we're on stage 2. So anything you talk yourself into, you can talk yourself out of. But again, this takes a lot of practice to see and be able to react on. So the first thing you need to do, just to go over the steps, is you need to control and shift your thinking from thoughts that are animalistic and, basically like extreme survival thoughts, back to regular and normal thinking. By challenging these thoughts, you will see that they just don't make sense. And when you get to that point, we're going to be able to stop step number 2 and 3 from happening. So I hope that you really enjoyed this. If you'd like to know more about, any of this, or dealing with panic attacks, or some of the things that I do, you can always reach out to me. But I just thought I'd educate you and let you know a little bit about the research that I've done on panic attacks, and also working with clients one-on-one. And these are very easy things that you can do, easy steps to remember. But what really makes it powerful is practice makes perfect. The most important thing to remember about a panic attack is it starts at a very, very low level. So if you catch it then, you will not get to the apex, which is the event. So there is hope to stop from these apexes, because those are the parts of the panic attack that make it crippling to deal with. So I really hope you enjoyed this talk, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and stay safe out there, and I will talk to you soon. Bye for now from Tree of Life Hypnosis.